And welcome back to Bengal Bites, a podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from one fan's real, honest perspective. As always, I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 49, the Lower Your Expectations episode. We'll talk about why we need to lower our expectations, but setting expectations is hard, as Zac Taylor found out this week. But in this episode, we're going to do a preseason Game 3 recap, an abbreviated recap of the final preseason game. Thankfully, the Bengals preseason has concluded. It's finally over. We don't need to watch any more of that. We're not going to completely skip over it because there's nothing worse than a podcast about football games that doesn't actually talk about the football game. So as bad as that game was, we'll talk about what we saw in that game, some takeaways from that game, the aftermath of the final preseason game against the Colts. We'll also discuss some big wide receiver contract signing news that's going to have ripple effects all throughout the league and on Ja'Marr Chase. We're going to talk about all the different roster moves that the Bengals made in the last few days, because Tuesday was the cut down day when they had to trim the roster to 53 and then later make some signings to the practice squad. So we'll talk about all the different moves that they made and some thoughts, impressions, reactions to those. A lot of stuff to get into in this episode. I'm recording this. It's almost a week after the final preseason game. I know it's not really timely. Everybody wants everything updated as quickly as possible, like the next morning after the game. You want the instant reaction. I know one of my fans out there, Laura, is always asking me, when's the next episode of the podcast coming out, like as soon as the game ends. Well, it takes me a little bit of time to come up with something to say. I don't have instant reactions, and most of the time instant reactions are completely worthless, and 24 hours later you could think something completely different, as Zac Taylor taught us this week about whether Ja'Marr Chase is going to be practicing or not. But it took me a while, and it also, I'm not going to be grinding the tape on preseason game 3 because most of these guys aren't going to be on the team, may not play in the NFL ever again. So I didn't feel like it was worth it to go too in-depth into this game. But I did have some thoughts and impressions, and I'll start, as always, with all the positives that I can think of from this game, because I know nobody wants to hear total cynicism and negativity 100% of the time. And just a brief side note, before we even get into this game, I saw an interview on Bengal Jim's YouTube show. They had, what's her face? Blackburn. Is it Elizabeth? Elizabeth Blackburn. She was on there, promoting the Bengals, basically. It's a fan show, and she was talking about how they had done all this stuff to improve the stadium, improve the locker rooms, improve the fan experience, and the Ring of Honor, and all the stuff that they were going to do this year to make this even more exciting for the fans and all that kind of stuff. But she's part of the ownership of the team. It was so weird on there. The thing that stuck out to me out of this interview, because I didn't listen to most of it, honestly, but the thing that stuck out to me was one of the guys who is a fan and season ticket holder, spends lots of money on the Bengals. He was like, so Elizabeth, what can we do as fans to help you? And like the look in her eye was just like, I could see the greedy little gears in her head working overtime, because obviously the real answer is, what can you do for me? Oh, well, continue coming to the game and spending money on the Bengals. But she said, well, we just want continued good vibes and support and positivity from you guys. And that's what the Bengals are always talking about, is preaching positivity. No negativity, positivity only. And on social media, positivity only. And that's what you always see going viral, is positive things. You always see, like, if a Bengals player had a good PFF grade. They give out these PFF grades and put a score on a player for a game. And so if a Bengals player got a high score, this Bengals player scored 95 PFF, and then everybody wants to share it around. But if a Bengals player had like the lowest PFF grade out of anybody, then that never goes viral. Nobody wants to share that or talk about that. So you see a lot of the other accounts associated with the Bengals, positivity only, all positive all the time. And that's especially when no games have been played. The media surrounding the Bengals are selling hope. They're selling optimism. They're selling positivity about the upcoming season. Everybody wants to believe that their team is going to win the Super Bowl, go undefeated, beat all their rivals. Nobody's ever going to get injured or anything. There's not going to be any bumps in the road. Right now, everybody wants to believe in optimism. I'm not saying I'm not optimistic too, but I also like some realism in my podcast. And too many podcasts, I found myself just shaking my head, saying, no, that's not realistic at all. They're just carrying the company line. Anyway, we don't need to talk about other podcasts, but I'm just saying, let's get to the positives because there are some, and then we'll get to the other stuff. So first of all, no injuries were reported out of this preseason game. As always, that's the biggest positive we could take. And almost none of the starters played in this game, so it would be almost impossible for anybody to get injured. But as we saw, Brad Robbins, the punter, got injured in warm-ups at practice one day. And incidentally, Brad Robbins has been put onto injured reserve. So whatever he did in that warm-up, he is going to be out for at least 4 games. And we're going to have Ryan Rico as the punter. They didn't make any other moves at punter, which we'll get into. Ryan Rico had an up and down performance in this game. But anyway, no injuries coming out of this game. That's number one. And we didn't have any injuries pop up after the game either. On top of no injuries, we also saw the Bengals score multiple touchdowns, which was somewhat of an anomaly for the Bengals. We did not see the Bengals score any touchdowns in the previous preseason game. They only got a field goal, so the fact that they scored 14 points was really an improvement from the last game. And they even scored one on offense. They had an offense and a defensive touchdown, so quite a dynamic scoring game for the Bengals. Also, this was a much cleaner game for the Bengals in terms of no interceptions were thrown, mostly good pass protection from the Bengals' backup offensive linemen, and much fewer penalties. They had 11 penalties in game number 2 against the Bears. Bengals only committed 1 penalty for 5 yards in this game, so huge improvement in that regard. Also, we didn't see any Jackson Carman playing into the first half and most of the third quarter. So that was a positive just to see that in this last game, when the people who are playing at the very end of the last preseason game, most of those guys, if not all of them, with a few exceptions, are not going to be playing for the Bengals. They're going to be not on the roster anymore. One of the bright spots we did see in this game was, strangely, Travion Williams led the Bengals in rushing. And the thing that was kind of weird about this was Travion was playing at the end of the game. He started the game, and he played pretty much the entire game. He had 11 carries for 66 yards, long of 16. He had a few nice runs, picked up a couple first downs, like on back-to-back runs, and it was like, oh, Travion Williams. And it was like, oh, great, hey, a little excitement. But then, like I said, he was playing into the end of the fourth quarter, and it was just confusing, like, why he was still out there with most of the people who weren't going to be even on the roster anymore, because, as we saw later, he made the initial roster, and now they're bringing him back on the practice squad. But it was confusing why they would keep playing him the whole game. Why not put somebody else out there, give somebody else a chance? But after the game, Zac Taylor said that he thought Travion earned it. He was like, oh, Travion has been with the Bengals for 6 seasons. They've seen what he can do. He was like, oh, he's earned these reps, earned these carries, and this will get him ready in case he needs to play in the regular season. He'll know what it's like playing in a real game. I was like, well, since he needs to play in the regular season, why not keep him healthy, make sure he doesn't get injured on any of these carries in a meaningless preseason game? But be that as it may, Travion didn't get injured, and he was no worse for the wear. So luckily, he got some good runs. Not so much in the passing game. For some reason, Travion was also their leading receiver in terms of targets. They threw 21 passes. 8 of them went to Travion, and he caught 5 of them for 11 yards, no touchdowns. They were mostly screen passes. A couple of them went through Travion's hands and almost got intercepted, but they kept throwing him the ball, and then like a couple times he just got blown up for no yards. So there, Zac Taylor, I know I'm trying to stay positive, but he was calling a lot of screen passes. That's usually, I guess, what he likes to do in the preseason. If I think back to the last couple seasons, they've been a screen-based offense. And when I say screen pass offense, obviously running plays, passing plays, and then screen passes are when you fake a deep pass, the quarterback drops back way behind the line of scrimmage. Offensive linemen may pretend like they're blocking, but then they let the guy go. So that's kind of like the screen door effect, I guess, like letting them through the line of scrimmage, through the screen. Basically, try to lure the defense one way, get them out of position, throw it over their heads or to the side, and open up a big lane for the offense to go through. Bengals were running that type of play, I would say like 20 to 30% of their offensive plays. They only ran 43 plays, and 3 of them were kneel downs at the end of the game. Actually, they had 4 kneel downs in the game, so they only ran like 40 offensive plays. As Zac Taylor said, that's about as few offensive plays as you can run in a game, which is true, but they give you more plays if you pick up first downs, and the Bengals were having trouble doing that, so they didn't get additional plays to run in the game. It's not like a random thing, but anyway, back to the positives. I gotta stick on the positives here. Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit were announced in the game for Amazon Prime instead of the Bengals preseason announcers. Going into Thursday night, I wasn't sure if I was actually going to watch the game live or just watch the recorded version after the fact, because the Bengals preseason announcers and just the production quality, it wasn't really up to par. And I was, you see the same ads, the same local ads for the same like funeral home and insurance agency and plumbing company. It's like, there's only so much of that kind of stuff you could take. But luckily, it was Al Michaels, Kirk Herbstreit. You got to see like instant replays and stuff like that. The quality of the game and the players out on the field for the most part wasn't that good. Al Michaels, he's getting to the age where he doesn't mind telling you how it is, but he was hanging in there. Kirk Herbstreit, they were obviously not too enthused with what they were seeing. But what do you expect? It's the end of the preseason. So we did see Jermaine Burton come through with another touchdown catch. Again, it was at the end of the game in the fourth quarter where I think he had a safety, like the Colts' 4th or 5th string safety guarding Jermaine Burton one-on-one on the outside. Easy matchup for the Bengals to convert into a touchdown. So that was good to see Jermaine Burton just able to completely moss these guys who are probably going to be selling insurance in the not too near future. But either way, that was a positive to see. Jermaine Burton still has the athletic ability, the talent that they drafted him for. But to that point, and transitioning a little bit to the negatives, again, same thing with Travion Williams. It was like, why is Jermaine Burton still playing in this game in the fourth quarter? Great that he scored a touchdown, but we already know, he was a 3rd-round pick. He's going to make the team. So why do they still have him out there catching passes? Well, why don't they put somebody else out there? Give somebody these, 4th, 5th-round guys, practice squad guys, an opportunity and not let Jermaine get hurt. But The thing that was concerning was at the beginning of the broadcast, they were talking about Jermaine Burton, how he had a lot of potential, but then Al Michaels was like, yeah, he just got to learn how to be professional and not fall asleep in meetings. And, he couldn't tell the way Kirk Herbstreit reacted was he just kind of making a general statement, or was it just kind of a joke or whatever? And Kirk was just like, yeah, that wouldn't be good. But that's not the type of comment that Al Michaels, a seasoned veteran, would just kind of put out there out of nowhere. So there's got to be something behind that. We're still not sure. But even after the game, they were interviewing Jermaine Burton, and he said that, he was glad that he was able to score the touchdown, show again why they drafted him, that he has that ability. And he mentioned how he needs to show the coaches that he's more locked in and a pro. And he, didn't really get into specifics, but he even alluded to the fact of something that he could improve on, which is, good to be self-aware, but also not good at the fact that he has some kind of issues that the Bengals aren't really playing him with, like the first and second team offense. Hopefully he's not sleeping in meetings. Like, that would be something even at like a high school football level. If you fall asleep in a football meeting, you get yelled at and scolded by your coaches and teammates. So maybe that was part of the issue why he bounced around from different schools in college. But definitely by the time you get to be a professional, this is supposed to be your career. You can't be falling asleep in meetings. So I don't know what is going on in Jermaine Burton's life. Again, he could have all kinds of issues that I don't even know about. But whatever the issues are, when you come to work, you can't be falling asleep on the job. So, the meetings aren't necessarily where the games are won and lost. So as long as he's not asleep, on Sundays, it shouldn't be that big of a problem. But at the same time, you need to pay attention and be prepared so you know what to do on Sundays when you get in the game. So it's a little bit, actually not a little bit, it's a lot concerning that a third round pick that they had high hopes for is maybe slacking off in his preparation. Outside of that, the other thing that was just odd, not only the fact that Logan Woodside played the entire game, but he played the entire game and didn't break 100 yards passing. He had 98 yards passing for the entire game on 21 passes. He was 16 for 21. Also took 2 sacks. So total, he had like 80 yards, that 1 touchdown, but long of 21, so they barely broke 21 yards. Not a offensive juggernaut in the preseason. And I know the Bengals are not calling all their good plays, but normally it looked like they were calling plays where the objective was to get 2 yards, and that was it. Like, it was a successfully executed play. Everybody did what they were assigned to do. And the assignment apparently was to not do anything and just get 2 yards and go down. So it was strange. Sometimes they would call, like the Bengals and the Colts, to be fair, would call the same play back to back, but in opposite directions. Like, they would call a pass to the left, and then they would call the exact same pass to the right. So this game was just not that interesting to watch in general. Al and Kirk, by the end of the game, were ready to wrap it up. Thankfully, as Al Michaels said, like the third quarter was like the fastest quarter of football because they just kept running. Both teams just kept the clock running. It was over in like 20 minutes. So the game was not long. I think we could put that in the positives, that it wasn't an especially long game in duration. Got that thing over with quick, and that was good. But it was just strange that they let Logan Woodside stay in the entire game. No Rocky Lombardi, who was the 4th string quarterback. The Colts played like 3 different quarterbacks in this game. Actually, no, 4 different quarterbacks in this game. And the Bengals only played 1 quarterback. And the end of the game, Rocky Lombardi got in for 3 snaps. The only plays he got in were to come in and take a knee at the end of the game to run the clock out. So you could see Rocky Lombardi was very disappointed. he didn't get to play in the game basically at all. And then the only thing he gets to do is come in, take the snap, take a knee 3 times. And then he got cut like a few days later. So he didn't really get to show anything. I hope he didn't like have family and people come to watch him like, hey guys, I'm going to be playing last preseason game. I'll probably get to play, and who knows, maybe I'll throw a touchdown, and then all you get to do is take a knee. That really sucked. But, they a same story from Zac Taylor after the game of Logan Woodside earned it. He wanted to, and then he said, Zac Taylor said that, well, I thought he was getting on a roll there and starting to really get into the flow of the game, and we still had a chance to win, and so I wanted to leave Logan in there and see what we could do. It's like, win the game. Who cares about winning the game? It's a preseason game. It doesn't matter. I have seen all I need to see of Logan Woodside at that point. Like, just for the entertainment factor, I just wanted to see Rocky, good or bad. Just let me see what Rocky Lombardi can do out there. We never know if you don't give him a chance to play at all. So like I said, we have seen Logan Woodside. He got his chance. It wasn't good. Let's just for the heck of it put Rocky Lombardi in. But no, and maybe I don't know what he looked like in practice. Maybe Rocky Lombardi was looking terrible in practice, and they didn't want to put him out there and embarrass himself. I don't know, but I'm glad I didn't go. I mean, there were a lot of fans who went and paid actual money to go and watch this game. And I don't know what the Bengals, maybe that was the thinking behind Zac Taylor. Oh, I totally forgot. In the first half, the Bengals defense did manage to get a pick 6 interception. Jordan Battle, it was a miscommunication by the Colts quarterback, Anthony Richardson. He thought his receiver was going to stand in one spot, and his receiver actually moved. And so right where Anthony Richardson threw it, actually there was a Bengals player there, had a walk-in touchdown for like 6 yards. So it was a good, heads-up play by Jordan Battle, but just not the type of play you'll see most of the time. But outside of that, the Bengals really didn't even challenge to score any points, and it felt like maybe Zac Taylor was thinking, okay, we got to give these fans something to cheer about. They've been sitting here, waiting for something to get excited about. And in theory, this whole preseason is supposed to be a advertisement for fans to get excited, pumped up, buy season tickets, buy tickets to upcoming games in the season. And that's what is so weird about the way the preseason is structured. It used to be, I'll go back in my day when I was growing up, we didn't have these cuts all at the end of the preseason. They used to do it more like, if you think about like the TV show Survivor, where the roster would get whittled down over training camp, smaller and smaller as you went. You would start off with the big roster for game 1. Then after game 1, it was like, okay, we could see who's not going to make the team already. Get these guys out of here. And so as the games went on, and they had 4 preseason games instead of just 3, as the preseason games went on, the starters would more likely play more towards like game 3, more towards the end of the preseason, get those bad games out of the way early. Then once you got later in the preseason, they were somewhat watchable. Now it's like the opposite, or it's hit or miss. For the Bengals, they put Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and the rest of the Bengals starting offense out for the very first drive of the first preseason game. After that, they didn't play at all. So the Bengals preseason pretty much peaked at the first series of the preseason. It was all downhill from there. So as Zac Taylor likes to talk about momentum, I didn't feel like the Bengals had a lot of momentum going into the regular season with not winning any games in the preseason. And it doesn't matter at all. Obviously, the records don't count for anything. But this was the first time that the Bengals went winless in the preseason in franchise history. But it's also, they just went to the 17-game schedule where there's only 3 preseason games. So it would have been a lot more difficult to not have any wins prior to the last couple of seasons. But if you look at the rest of the league, again, it doesn't matter, but if you look at the rest of the league in terms of points scored and points scored against, the Bengals had the greatest point differential between their score and the opponent. So the Bengals scored 31 points. Their opponent scored 71. So they got outscored by 40 points in 3 games. They also had one of the lowest points scored totals. Again, it doesn't matter. And I know they weren't trying to score points. But again, if you're trying to advertise for the team, this is not a great advertisement. So we'll have to see what's gonna actually happen in the regular season. But to that point, after the game was over, I was just so confused. I didn't know what to think. I still don't really know what they're doing with that game. But Monday, the big news that came out, Cowboys wide receiver CeeDee Lamb signed his contract extension, 4 years, $136 million. So it's like $34 million on a per year annual basis, $1 million less than what Justin Jefferson is getting roughly. I mean, these numbers are all kind of a little bit fudged, but they give you the big number in dollars per year just to make it easy for our simple minds to understand. But that was kind of what we thought was going to be one of the dominoes to fall in this kind of 3-way or multiple players holding out, holding in, having contract disputes with their team. We saw Brandon Ayuk for the 49ers request a trade, and multiple teams have been interested in him, but he hasn't made any kind of deal or come to any agreement. For some reason, he's still with the 49ers. Obviously, Jamar Chase hasn't been practicing with the Bengals. He's in that same sort of situation, although it's different for Jamar Chase because he still has 2 years remaining on his rookie contract. Brandon Ayuk and CeeDee Lamb are 1 year ahead of Jamar. They only have 1 year left on their contract. They're going into their contract season, as it were. So they're, a little bit more advanced into their years. But Jamar, the thing that's different about Jamar is, he's better than those guys, I would say. And he's proven it on a more consistent basis. And when you hear other people outside of just the Bengals fan base and Bengals media sphere, just on a national level, when you hear them discussing the Jamar Chase contract, let's not call it a dispute, let's just call it negotiations. They're discussing it. You never hear anybody say, well, but he doesn't deserve it, or he's not good enough, or he's not one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. That is not even a discussion. Everybody agrees on that. The only thing that they can even point to is, but he still has 2 years remaining on his contract. And the Bengals even admitted, Jamar has done everything. He's one of our most important players. We're going to bend over backwards to get a deal done, but we just don't want to do it right now. We don't want to do it yet. And I don't understand why they wouldn't want to, because from Jamar's perspective, if the Bengals want to have him be the focal point of their offense and a focal point of their marketing, when we see the promotional videos for Week 1, Orange Stadium, Jamar Chase is in the video. He's doing the gritty. He's next to Joe Burrow. He's part of their franchise, how they market themselves. He's part of their image, and they're trying to make money off of him, but at the same time, they don't want to cut him in on any of the proceeds. They say you have to honor your rookie contract, which he had no say in. It was play for the Bengals because they drafted him. It's not like he had a choice of which team to play for or which contract he was able to sign. It was pick the Bengals contract or don't play in the NFL. That was the two options. Whoever the Bengals picked would have gotten the same contract as Jamar Chase. So he didn't really have any leverage to say anything, but he's outplayed his contract. And there's no other job that I can think of where if you started, you did everything your employer asked you to do, you went above and beyond for 3 years to the point where they were going to, focus the whole company around you and put you on your pictures on their website and you're like the focal point of the whole company, but they're like, but we're not going to give you a raise until a couple years from now. It's like, well, how motivated would you be as an employee to go out and give it your all for the company, but the company doesn't want to compensate you for it? I totally understand where Ja'Marr Chase is coming from. Around this same time, actually Sunday, the day before CeeDee Lamb signed or agreed on his contract extension, we saw news from the Bengals on their website. They showed Ja'Marr Chase with his helmet and jersey on in the Bengals stadium going through a practice. And so that was a big headline. Ja'Marr Chase ends his holdout. He's back practicing with the team. So if he was back, he hadn't been practicing all preseason, sat out every practice, sat out all the preseason games, didn't do anything. All of a sudden, he's back on the field practicing. And then CeeDee Lamb gets his contract extension. So people are kind of piecing those things together and hoping that that means that a contract extension for Ja'Marr is going to be happening soon. And then Tuesday was, like we mentioned, the cut down to 53. There weren't a ton of surprises in that cut down day, honestly. The biggest headline that I'm not going to put this in the positives, but a lot of people were celebrating a guy getting fired from his job, which isn't nice, but a lot of people were very excited to see Jackson Carman being released by the Bengals. He was one of the first people they released, and that wasn't a surprise, but he was one of their only draft picks that they released. One of the other ones that they released initially was Trey Hill, the center, who was a later round draft pick, also in that same draft with Jackson Carman, but they brought Trey Hill back on the practice squad later. Jackson Carman did not make it back on the practice squad. Like I mentioned, they cut Rocky Lombardi, the quarterback. He didn't even get to do anything in the preseason. And, maybe he wouldn't have got to do anything, but it still seems kind of unfair. He went through the whole preseason and only got to take like 5 snaps. So I don't think he's going to get an opportunity to really do anything. Maybe he wouldn't have done anything anyway, but it just kind of stinks he didn't get to show anything. They let go of Noah Cain and Elijah Collins, the 2 running backs. They only kept 3 running backs on the initial 53, and then they waived Travion Williams. But since Travion has been in the league for more than 4 seasons, this is his 6th season, he's not subject to the waiver wire, so he's free to sign with any team that he wants. So he didn't want to go anywhere. He's been with the Bengals his whole career. It was just a kind of a technicality. They needed room on the roster. Travion's going to start on the practice squad. All the Travion fans can take a deep breath. He'll be coming back. There's a few others. Justin Blazek, he was an undrafted guy. He actually played a pretty nice game in this preseason game 3, and I don't think they brought him back on the practice squad. He's a little bit undersized and not that athletic, but he had a forced fumble and he played hard. Who knows? He might get picked up on another roster, or they could bring him back later in the season. But that was maybe a little bit surprising. They let go of a few other linebackers. But in terms of the initial 53, all of 10 of the Bengals draft picks made it onto the roster, including both of the tight ends. There were Eric All and Tanner McLachlan. You'd think 5 tight ends on a roster seems a little bit excessive, but they are really committed to, I guess, passing and having 2 tight end sets a lot. They only are going to have, 1 running back. I can't imagine them having any 2 running back sets at all. This is going to be 1 running back and a bunch of receivers and tight ends. The other thing we didn't know is who's going to be going to injured reserve. I already mentioned Brad Robbins, the punter. He went on to injured reserve, as well as Miles Murphy, first-round pick from last season. He has a sprained MCL. So I might have mentioned on the previous episode, we saw him get carted off of the joint practice with the Colts. Wasn't clear how severe the injury was going to be, but it sounds like a sprained MCL probably won't require surgery, but those are typically 4 to 6 weeks, going to require, probably like a immobility brace. He's going to maybe have some crutches for a couple weeks and then be able to get some flexion in his knee back. He shouldn't be, out for the entire season, but obviously it's not going to be helpful. It's not going to do anything to aid him and make him better at football, having a sprained knee ligament right before the season starts. And that's unfortunate because the Bengals were already a little bit, slim at the defensive end position. Sam Hubbard is coming back from surgery in the offseason, but also a little bit of an injury in the preseason that kept him out of some practices. We saw Cam Sample tore his Achilles tendon. Jeff Gunter retired. They do have Cedric Johnson, the rookie, who shows some flashes. He actually had a sack. I should have mentioned that. I forgot. Cedric Johnson had a sack, but it was called back because of an illegal defensive contact penalty. The only penalty of the whole game nullified a sack by the Bengals. Dijon Anthony, 5-yard penalty that gave them a first down. But really no huge surprises. One other note in terms of an injury, Amarius Mims did not go on injured reserve. Zac Taylor didn't really give any kind of an update. I think he said that the plan was for Amarius to ease back into practice this week, and then hopefully by the time week 1 for the game comes around, he'll be practicing in full. That's yet to be seen, but they didn't put him on injured reserve, meaning he would have to miss the first 4 games of the season at minimum. So they expect Amarius Mims to come back within the first 4 weeks. I'm thinking of, I think it was T. Higgins maybe, got injured. They didn't put him on injured reserve, but he just kept sitting out game after game after game. It got to be, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. They'd still be like, he's still working his way back. So it was like, why don't they put this guy on injured reserve then instead of having him take up a roster spot? But hopefully Amarius Mims is going to be back sooner than 4 weeks, and we can see what he looks like out on the field. Because Bengals they've had hit or miss. Obviously with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, first-round picks, they've had a lot of success with. But other first-round picks, they've had rookie seasons that have been entirely lost. I'm thinking about Jonah Williams, William Jackson III, Miles Murphy didn't really do a whole lot last year. Dax Hill didn't really do a whole lot his rookie season. So they need to get something out of these first-round picks, get some return on investment sooner rather than later. But after the first initial list of 53, it's not the final 53, it's just the initial 53, because the roster is always changing. And even after that, the waiver wire, Bengals picked up a couple defensive linemen. So they're still making adjustments, moving people on and off practice squad. Some people who, they got released and then re-signed and then re-released and then re-signed again. And some people get traded to other teams. Bengals did not do any trades. They are very reticent and reluctant, it seems like, to make a lot of deals with other teams. They don't want to, obviously, they kept all 10 picks. They didn't trade a single pick. They want to keep all those picks, keep all those, because the thing about draft picks is, unlike free agents or undrafted guys who have the ability to negotiate their contracts, draft picks don't have any ability to negotiate their contracts. They're locked in for a certain amount of time and a certain pay. They don't have anything to say about it, and that's what the Bengals like. They like having people under control. We'll get into that a little bit later, but really the only notable undrafted player that made the roster was the linebacker Muma Jong-Meta. He was the one who was leading the team in tackles, making crazy run stops, tackles for a loss. And he was popping off the film, and like I mentioned, I didn't know how he was necessarily in pass coverage, and I didn't really go back and grind the tape and watch every play of him in pass coverage. I did watch another video of somebody else grinding the tape, and apparently he got I don't subscribe to Pro Football Focus, but in the game against the Bears, Jung Meta got a 29 grade, which is impressively low. apparently it was because on the pass plays when you're watching on TV, you can't really see where the guys are who are going back into coverage. They're like off the screen, so you can't tell what they're doing. But he was apparently not doing what he was supposed to be doing, not guarding anybody. He was just kind of like lost out in space, not really doing anything effective on that long Caleb Williams touchdown run. It was partially like Jean Meta's fault. He should have like been there tackling Caleb Williams instead of like running around in the end zone. But there are a couple times where he had things like that. So he's a good hitter, good open field tackler. And that's something that they've been lacking. So if they can coach him up on covering the pass, because he's a very intelligent guy. He's not fast, we've seen that, but he's got quick reactions and he's got good instincts. So if they can kind of coach him up on what to do in the passing game, how to cover people, he could be an effective, backup linebacker. Obviously, Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt are going to play 90% of the snaps because they are making the most money. But if we need to have somebody come in, maybe Jean Meta could provide a little bit of a spark. Let's just run through starting lineups real quick here. So on offense, quarterback Joe Burrow, running back Zach Moss, wide receivers Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Andre Iosivas. We expect Andre Iosivas to have a big year. A lot of people were saying Jermaine Burton was just going to come in as a rookie and start, but it takes a while to get used to the NFL game. And Andre's been looking good all preseason. He's been catching passes, looking big, looking fast. Mike Gesicki, I think everybody would agree he's going to be an upgrade over Irv Smith Jr., who, by the way, got released by the Chiefs. Irv Smith Jr., he's gone. Speaking of, real quick, other Bengals who got released by other teams, La'el Collins got released by the Bills. He was a backup guard for them this preseason. He's not going to come back. CJ Uzomah, tight end for the Bengals a few seasons ago when they went to the Super Bowl. He got released by the Eagles. He's probably, I don't know if he's going to get picked up by anybody else. And a lot of Bengals fans were salivating for running back Samaje Perine from the Super Bowl team to come back and fill in that void that they seem to have still at running back. But he signed with the Chiefs, the dreaded, hated Chiefs. How could you, Samaje Perine? But I don't know if the Bengals tried to get him back. Maybe they just weren't interested. He's not built like all the other smaller running backs that they currently have on the roster, because they have Zach Moss, Chase Brown, and that's it, because Trayvon's on the practice squad technically. So they only have 2 running backs on the roster. Chris Evans is on injury reserve. It's going to be an interesting offense, but as far as the offensive line goes, they still got Orlando Brown Jr. at left tackle, Cordell Volson at left guard, Ted Karras center, Alex Kappa right guard, and right now, since Amari Mims is still injured, they've got Trent Brown, the veteran, at right tackle. On defense, it's very similar to the defense that they had last year, which I don't know if it's good or bad, because they had the worst defense in the league last year. But they still have Sam Hubbard, B.J. Hill, Trey Hendrickson on the defensive line, and they swapped out DJ Reader for Sheldon Rankins. Then at linebacker, they still got Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt. Then at safety, they've got Geno Stone and Von Bell. At cornerback, now we've got Cam Taylor-Britt, and Dax Hill has moved from safety to cornerback. And then if we want to say Akeem Davis-Gaither is a starting linebacker, he'd be the third one, but Mike Hilton is probably going to be playing just as much as Akeem Davis-Gaither. Bengals don't normally have 3 linebackers on the field. They normally have that nickel cornerback, third cornerback on the field. Mike Hilton would be that. We'll see if they bring in DJ Turner, and maybe Josh Newton could get some snaps if they have like multiple defensive backs on the field at the same time. Lou Anarumo has all kinds of defensive alignments, but edge rusher, pass rusher, they're still a little bit light. Joseph Osai, hopefully he has a better season. He said he was kind of injured last year. We know he hyperextended his knee in the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs 2 seasons ago, so he wasn't 100%. They also picked up KJ Henry. who is a defensive end for the Commanders, mid-round pick. I think they also picked up a defensive nose tackle from the Cowboys. So we'll have to see. I don't really anticipate these guys who the Bengals are picking up off the waiver wire. And the Bengals have the number 18 spot in the waiver claim, meaning if any player goes through the waiver wires, 17 other teams have to say no for the Bengals to be able to acquire the player. So not getting the best players on the waiver wire, obviously. I don't anticipate they're going to come in and just like vastly upgrade the roster. But obviously the Bengals felt like defensive line was a position that they needed to get stronger at it. And it was obvious in the preseason, even though the starters weren't playing, the backups were getting pushed all over the field on the defensive line for the Bengals. So they needed to get some better depth, especially on the defensive interior. Now, for some reason, the Bengals decided to have Zac Taylor hold a press conference for this 53 initial roster, where he didn't say anything, obviously. He just said, yeah, we feel really good about these 53 guys. And all the reporters would ask him, like, well, what about, this guy? Why did he make the team? Well, we feel really good about that guy and what he's going to be a part of and how he's going to help this team. Well, how about this group? Well, that group's doing really good, and we feel really good about those guys. So that wasn't interesting at all. And then since CeeDee Lamb was in the news, they didn't ask about CeeDee Lamb and his contract, but obviously everybody's thoughts were on Ja'Marr Chase, especially since he started practicing. He practiced for 2 days in a row. They weren't heavy-duty practices. They were like just very light, minimal, not going to cause any injury risk to Ja'Marr, but he was back out practicing. So they were interested in Ja'Marr, and Zac Taylor was like, oh yeah, he's going to be practicing this week, and we expect him to practice. Everything's on track. And so, because people are interested not only in terms of whether Ja'Marr Chase is going to get his contract signed, whether or not he's going to play, not from a perspective of, are the Bengals going to win games? Are they going to be able to go to the Super Bowl? But a lot of people are gambling on Ja'Marr Chase, so they have financial interest in terms of like fantasy football, or if they want to bet on how many yards and how many touchdowns is Ja'Marr Chase going to have in this season. Well, it makes a difference if he's going to miss some games or not. So people are interested, not just who are fans of the Bengals, but for gambling and other reasons, people around the world are very interested in the status of Ja'Marr Chase as we head into the first game of the season, which is less than 10 days away now at this point. We're getting to the point where he needs to start preparing. If he's going to play in the game, they need to start getting him prepared along with the rest of the team. And so the Bengals reporters were asking in various different ways. Okay, so you're saying you expect Ja'Marr Chase to be ready to play for week 1. Zac Taylor, yes. Okay, so just to clarify, you're saying that you expect Ja'Marr Chase to practice this week and he'll be ready to go and play in week 1. And then Zac Taylor got like all defensive and started copping an attitude. And he was like, look, this isn't complicated, okay? He's practicing just like he's been practicing. And yeah, like nothing has changed. All part of the plan. We expect him to be out there for week 1. Okay, so it's very definitive. And so as soon as that came out, all these reporters want to run and write stories about, okay, Zac Taylor says, don't worry, Ja'Marr Chase is on track to play week 1. They're going to get it figured out. And then on NFL.com, you see stories like, oh, Bengals and Ja'Marr Chase look like they're getting close to a contract. Seems like they're still negotiating and blah, blah, blah. A lot of this is stuff put out by Ja'Marr Chase's agent to put more pressure, because they're all about, that's the other thing. Zac Taylor is trying to set expectations that Ja'Marr Chase is going to be there. So Ja'Marr Chase's agent is setting the expectation that a contract is going to get signed soon. And that's the back and forth is Ja'Marr Chase is going to be there if a contract gets signed soon. So both of them are trying to set expectations against each other. Because Zac Taylor is trying to put the pressure on, then a lot of the reporters who, like I say, carry the water for the team. They feel like not all the reporters, some of the reporters are asking the good questions. A lot of the reporters just want to report on what the team wants them to say, but a lot of people are like, oh, why would Jamar hold out? We've been over this before. It makes total sense why Jamar would want to hold out, because he's not getting paid enough money for the rest of the season, and he's due for a raise. He needs a raise. If the Bengals want to win games and the Bengals want to have their best players playing up to the best of their ability, they should take care of them when the time has come. So that was Tuesday. Zac Taylor says Jamar Chase is coming back. Nothing to worry about. All this news stories are saying Jamar Chase's contract is right around the corner. Then Wednesday comes. Jamar Chase doesn't show up at practice initially. He comes up about 15 minutes late, they said, not wearing his Bengals gear. He's wearing, just normal street clothes. He's not in uniform. He's not participating in practice. This is the day after Zac Taylor told everybody very confidently and very definitively Jamar Chase will be practicing. So it's like, well, what gives then? You just said Jamar Chase for sure is practicing. Here it is a day later. What changed? Zac Taylor all smiles as usual. He's like, oh, what did I say? That he was going to practice? Well, every day is a different day, and things can change day to day, and I guess I put my foot in my mouth with that one, but we're just going to take it day to day from now on instead of me saying anything. So he said it would be wise of me not to say anything else, which is another way of saying it was very foolish of Zac Taylor to even say anything, that he is not, have any say in contract negotiations. Like, he's not the owner. I'm sure Zac Taylor would sign Jamar Chase to a contract extension as soon as possible so that he could get on with the business of winning football games. But it's not his decision. He's just the one who has to go in front of the cameras and answer the questions. But it's not up to him. And it's not up to him to decide whether or not Jamar Chase is going to come to practice or not. So he can get up there and say Jamar Chase will be at practice. Well, Jamar Chase doesn't have to listen to you, Zac Taylor, and he doesn't necessarily need to obey your commands or, fall in line and do what, the pressure of the fandom wants him to do. When you think about Jamar Chase, think about that Monday Night Football game against the Jaguars where he cut the long touchdown and then he just kind of walked in backwards into the end zone looking at the guy he just beat. And they said, why did you slow down and walk backwards into the end zone against that guy? And Jamar said, because I wanted to be disrespectful. I wanted to be disrespectful to that guy because I wanted to let him know that I'm better than him. And that's kind of where I feel like Jamar Chase is saying with this, where he wanted to let Zac Taylor know that Jamar is the one who's calling the shots, not Zac Taylor. He's not going to let Zac Taylor dictate anything about his negotiations or if and when he comes back to practice or not, because until he gets the contract signed, he's not stepping on the field. As Ocho Cinco said, he's not putting anything at risk. And his agents would be negligent if they let him play, honestly, because if Jamar gets hurt, the agents don't get paid either. So the agents are saying, hey, you can't play until you get the contract signed, because if you get hurt, we're not getting paid either. So in the interest of both of us, you're not playing until we get the contract signed. To me, there's really no good explanation for why they haven't gotten the deal signed yet, other than the Bengals just don't want to. And the thing is, with Joe Burrow, they waited right until the few days before the first game of the season. So there's still some precedent for waiting this long. But it's getting to a point where it's becoming a distraction. Ted Karras, they interviewed him in the locker room, and he said none of the players have any ill will or animosity towards Jamar. They understand it's a business, and they all hope he gets his contract signed too, because all of them want to get a contract extension when it's their turn to get a contract extension also. So they're all hoping for Jamar, just like they hope that he would be wishing the same thing for them. Just like Jamar is looking at Joe Burrow, who was one draft ahead of him, and he's saying, hey, Joe Burrow got a contract extension after 3 seasons. I have played my 3 seasons. I want a contract extension too. It'd be like if you were the younger brother, your older brother got an allowance when he turned 13 years old, and then you're 1 year younger. You turn 13 years old. You're like, okay, let me get that allowance. Parents say, you've been doing everything right. We love you just the same as your older brother, but we're going to wait and give you that allowance next year. You would feel like you got slighted. It's like, what is the difference between me and my older brother? Why would there be any favoritism going on between the two of us? So I think the Bengals need to take care of Jamar just like they took care of Joe Burrow. But obviously, the fans were much more supportive and would have revolted a lot more if the Bengals didn't sign Joe Burrow to a contract extension, because people were, Joe Burrow's going to leave, he's going to hold out. There's not as much anxiety about Jamar Chase. There's some, but I think people are more willing to accept the fact that, we can just replace Jamar with somebody else. Fans will still go to the game, still keep buying tickets, showing up and saying "Hoo Day" and chugging a beer, and it doesn't matter who Joe Burrow is throwing to. Was it number 1, number 5, number 80, whatever? They don't even know really who most of these people are anyway. So I think that's what the Bengals are kind of taking the perspective of. They're still going to be able to sell tickets, sell merchandise, make money with or without Jamar Chase. As a football connoisseur, I want to see the best product possible on the field. I feel like if I'm going to pay money and go to see a Bengals game, I want to see the highest quality product out there and not, a low quality substitute. So I'm hopeful that they will get a deal done. So not only the Bengals will win games, but also they'll be more fun to watch. Like, I think just football fans in general are going to miss out if Jamar is not on the field, because he's a special, unique talent that everybody can enjoy watching and admiring his talents on the field. But we all lose if we lose out on having Jamar Chase. So I hope the Bengals don't steal the joy away from the greater NFL audience. Don't, extinguish the light of Jamar Chase and hide it away. But I can't really figure out the Bengals' line of thinking for the most part in terms of financial decisions. They only recently decided to, sell the naming rights to the stadium. It was Paul Brown Stadium for as long as the stadium existed, up until a couple seasons ago when they sold it to Paycor. They've tried to dabble in various things. Betfred was the official betting partner of the Bengals, but they canceled that deal because Betfred was like the number 15th most popular betting site in Ohio. Obviously, they weren't getting there. I think they're pulling out of Ohio just in general, so they don't need to market with the Bengals. I'm sure the Bengals will find a new gambling sponsor to partner up with, but they're getting more and more commercialized. But it shouldn't be a surprise that the NFL owners took a vote on whether or not to change up the financial structure of ownership. So the Bengals are exclusively family owned. Paul Brown was the founder, and then Mike Brown has passed it. He's going to pass it down to his kids and his grandkids, and it's all kept within the family. And there was a vote about whether or not the NFL should allow corporate investments like corporate hedge funds and, large pools of money to come in and buy a certain percentage of ownership of an NFL team. Like, they say it's going to be 10%, but you could see where they start with 10%, increase it little by little, where we could have, full on like corporations owning NFL teams. The vote was almost unanimous, but you can guess who the only dissenting vote was. Mike Brown and the Bengals. Out of 32 teams, 31 voted yes, we would like to accept more money. Bengals voted no. They said, no, we don't want any more money. No, thank you. Keep your money away from us. We would rather sell used televisions at the stadium for $50 a pop than have an influx of millions and possibly billions of dollars from corporate hedge funds. I don't think so. We're not selling anything. We're keeping it all for ourselves, which doesn't make any sense. Obviously, Mike Brown is the one always talking about, oh, the pie is only so big. We only have so many pieces of pie to give out to the players. Well, the owners are trying to say, hey, what if we made the pie bigger? Mike Brown saying, nope, pie is good size that it is. Pie doesn't need to get any bigger. I'm going to keep the same pie. So it doesn't matter. Like if it's a vote of, it doesn't need to be unanimous. It's 31 yays, 1 nay. But why vote no? Why vote no, I don't want more money? I don't understand the logic behind it other than he is scared that somebody could possibly buy the team away from him. He's going to be dead and long life to Mike Brown and all, but he's in his getting close to 90 years old at this point. He's not going to be around forever. He can pass it on to his family. That's fine. But I think there's some kind of fear that someone will do a hostile takeover and take the Bengals franchise away from the family like they did to the Browns. I don't know, but something weird is going on with the whole not wanting to accept the money. But just imagine if they had that money, it would be so much easier to make contracts like this go through and get accepted, get done, and not have to go through this weird song and dance and acrimonious negotiation. It's so far, both sides, Jamar and the Bengals, have kept everything out of the media. There haven't been any leaks. Nothing from one side or the other about the Bengals have. Who knows what if the Bengals have offered anything. That could be part of it, is if the Bengals are just sticking their heels in the ground saying, no, we're not even going to offer any contract extension whatsoever. That would make sense why Jamar is holding out, because if he holds out, then that's going to at least get them to come to the negotiating table and offer something. Hopefully they have at least, but I don't know, because I've heard from a lot of other former players of the Bengals. The Bengals are notorious for giving lowball offers. That's why you see a lot of players sign with other teams, because the Bengals just didn't give me a competitive offer. They were way lower than every other team. And right now, nobody is competing with the Bengals for Jamar. So they don't have to, make a better offer than anybody else. They can put out whatever offer they want, no matter how low it is. Maybe Jamar feels like whatever offer that they gave him was insultingly low, if they did give him any offer at all. Hopefully they gave him something in the ballpark. And if Jamar is not being, totally unreasonable, I would say if it's in the ballpark of a Justin Jefferson, $35 million a year, Bengals should be able to accommodate that. It's only going to get more expensive as more wide receivers sign these massive contracts. Next time, it could, next year, if they want to wait, it's going to be $40 million or more. So it would be better to get it done now. I don't see the point of waiting. I think they're just trying to push it off, kick the can down the road, and not pay money before they have to. Obviously, Jamar wants the money now. They don't want to pay it now. I want Jamar to play his best. And I think, not that necessarily a player is going to play better just because you give him a good contract, but I don't think not giving a contract is going to make him play better either. So if he's kind of disgruntled and he's worried about preserving his body, not getting hurt more than he is, playing his best, then the results on the field might not be as good. I don't know. To me, I would want my star players to be happy and to be able to play their best, take care of them financially. But it's not my money. So with that, I think we've pretty much covered everything there is to cover. There's going to be a lot more news coming out in the next week or two, I'm sure, leading up to the game. So we'll come back with a Game 1 preview in the next episode. And maybe we'll have a little bit more of an update in terms of any new roster signings or contract extensions. I didn't get any email comments. So if you got any questions, comments, whatever it is, send me something at bengalbitespodcast@gmail.com. I'll read it on the show. Until next time, I'm going to leave you with a Who Dey and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.